Hello everybody! Today we're mixing things up with a hybrid between a ranking and an insider's guide. In this mini-series, each episode will focus on a specific skier level, breaking down the best resorts in California for that category. For this first episode, we're diving into expert and extreme terrain. California is home to some of the gnarliest, most challenging terrain on the west coast, making it incredibly tough to narrow this list down to just 5 resorts. But, after careful consideration, I've put together a selection of the top 5 ski resorts in the state for expert skiers, listed in no particular order, along with a mini insider's guide tailored specifically to this skill level. So without further ado, let's jump into an expert skier's guide to California ski resorts. Let's kick things off with the one and only Mammoth Mountain. While Mammoth's extreme terrain is a bit more concentrated than other mountains primarily found off the summit and Lincoln Mountain, it still delivers by far the best extreme terrain access for folks living in Southern California. Lincoln Mountain is one of the quieter areas on the mountain, but hidden around are some really unique lines. The centerpiece is, of course, the Avalanche Chutes, a series of 3 couloirs that offer some of the best steep fall line skiing on the mountain. The middlemost, Avi 2, is the toughest trail off Lincoln Mountain, offering an insanely technical upper section that's often littered with obstacles. It does open up a good bit after this initial choke, however. Avi 3 and Avi 1 are slightly easier, but still quite challenging in their own rights. While the Avi Chutes are by far the most iconic trails off Lincoln Mountain, the face runs, such as Shaft, Viva, and Grizzly, also offer really great steep skiing. There are also several other solid, lesser-known expert trails across other pods in the mountain, including the Dos Passos Chutes and Hemlocks off Chair 14, the Gravy Chute area off Chair 1, and so on. As we touched on earlier, the most iconic expert trails are found off the resort's summit. The Dragon's Back area is home to some of the steepest lines on the mountain, specifically the Head Chutes area. The Top of the World Chutes contains some of the most insane exposure I've come across at any ski resort, period, and should be skied only by true experts. We're going to switch to some footage, but keep working across the summit from lookers left to right. Climax is your classic mogul-riddled bowl and is one of the most iconic runs at any ski resort in California. Hangman's Hollow is a really steep hourglass chute, one of the most well-known lines at Mammoth. Videos do not do this thing justice. Dropout and Wipeout chutes are some of the most impressive directly lift-serve chutes I've seen, and while they do get skied out pretty quick, the terrain is excellent. Of course, the most notorious expert area at all of Mammoth Mountain is Paranoid Flats, a series of 4 cornice chutes that get progressively steeper from lookers left to right. I want to highlight Paranoid 4 specifically. That terrain is genuinely scary and is always sketchy no matter how much snow has fallen. Its adjacent neighbor, Philippe's, is even crazier with a steeper ending and one of the most nerve-wracking exit airs I've ever seen. Of course, both runs pale in comparison to the hardest run on the mountain, Kiwi Flats, a couloir so insane that we'll just let this video from our friend Daily Spam do the talking. Go check it out if you haven't seen it already. Let's now move up north to Lake Tahoe's Mount Rose. A shout out to Snowstash for providing us footage for Rose and Sugar Bowl since we haven't been able to get back to them since we first started filming. While most of the footprint here is admittedly very mellow, the Mount Rose chutes single-handedly allow this ski area to make this list. The chutes are reminiscent of the lines in Heavenly's Killabrew Canyon, except they're longer and much more accessible. Runs such as Miller Time and Cutthroat that are closer to the lifts are fairly mellow, but all the chutes accessed from the El Cap and Yellow Jacket gates are legit. These runs cover the steepest part of the zone and offer sustained, no-fall pitches all the way to the bottom. The craziest line in the chutes aren't even marked on the trail map and are fairly hidden, for a reason. Lines such as Captivator and Dragon Lady, which are found in the trees between the marked runs, are even more technical and gnarly. The chutes at Mount Rose provide some of the steepest terrain in Tahoe, making this otherwise mellow resort a must-visit for expert skiers. Moving just south of the primary Tahoe region, Kirkwood is home to some of the most wicked terrain in California. A lot of Kirkwood's terrain is hidden in plain sight, so it can take a bit of exploring to find all the good stuff. Whoa. Let's go from lookers right to left on the trail map. This whole area above the marked Chamois contains some of the wildest terrain on the mountain. Lookers left of Sentinel is Upper Gyms, which consists of several extremely steep cornice drop-ins. Skiers right of Upper Gyms is Ski School Chute, which is a super fun classic hourglass chute. Upper Chamois and Patrolman's are the next lines over, and are some of the most intense lines at Kirkwood. Over in the Wagon Wheel Bowl, Cliff Chute, Saddle Chute, and False Peak Chute are 3 excellent lines that offer a good variety of terrain. Cliff Chute runs right adjacent to the Fingers, a series of several unmarked lines that are exceedingly technical. They require tight turns or long straight lines, and sometimes mandatory drops depending on snow conditions. Saddle Chute is home to several entrances that get progressively harder as you move further up the ridge. Sister's Chute is a solid boulder-defined chute, but I prefer its neighbor, Upper Sister's Chute. Looker's left of Upper Sister's is Heart Chute, one of the most demented lines on the mountain. Heart Chute takes a lot of snow to be skiable, and, even with a solid base, can require a 20-foot exit air. Next to Heart Chute is the slightly less intimidating Once Is Enough, the marquee straight line in a resort known for its straight lines. Notch Chute is essentially a much wider version of Once Is Enough, but is still a very cool narrow shot on this ridge. All the Way is less of a chute than its neighboring runs, but still has a sketchy, corniced entry. The Wall, the main run in this pod, is Kirkwood's claim to fame, and while it offers a thrilling descent, in all honesty, it might be the easiest run we've discussed so far. It's practically just a mogulled bowl, and is sometimes even groomed, although this is pretty rare.
I'm cold!
Just below the Wall is Dick's Drop, the most quote-unquote hidden in plain sight chute at the resort. Norm's Nose is a pretty underutilized area on the mountain, but it's a very fun rocky outcropping that has a few really fun gnarly chutes and cliff drops. While it doesn't run that often, which means you will have to hike, the Vista T-Bar accesses some of the most underrated terrain at Kirkwood. The terrain directly under it, known as Vista, is home to several burly cliff drops and crazy lines. Shot 5 is the prominent couloir just Looker's right of Vista. Boilermaker is an interesting chute that's bounded by rocks on one side and trees on the other. The remaining chutes are only accessible from Chair 4 on the backside. Hell's Delight is one of the most challenging marked runs at Kirkwood. This area is much more spread out than it appears on the trail map. Just adjacent to Hell's Delight is the Soul Searcher Zone, which contains several intense cliff drops and straight lines. The most notable line in here is called Swirl Chute. While Thunder Saddle itself isn't anything too crazy, there are several spines just below it that make for some great skiing and riding. The most infamous line here is called the Handrail, and to say that it's sketchy would be an understatement. The remaining double black trails adjacent to Thunder Saddle are all fairly mellow. In all honesty, Kirkwood has so many great lines, and we go into much greater detail with our Insider's Guide, linked in the top right of your screen now. We highly recommend checking that out if you want to learn about this insane experts-only lineup in line-by-line detail. Moving back up north, Sugar Bowl is home to some criminally underrated expert and extreme terrain in the Lake Tahoe area, despite being marketed as a family-friendly resort. We'll go from Looker's left to right on the trail map. The summit lift almost never runs, so you'll have to take a decently long hike to get to the runs it accesses. Unfortunately though, all this terrain is pretty subpar and isn't worth the hike for the amount of vert you get. Judah Bowl and Century Club are the most interesting lines in this area, but you can find plenty of better directly lift-served extremes elsewhere on the mountain. Speaking of which, Lincoln Express is home to some of the most ridiculous lift-served extremes in the country. The centerpiece terrain here is the Sisters, a cliff band that is home to a countless number of chutes and straight lines. This one zone alone is so extensive that you could literally lap it all day long and ski a different chute with each lap. Fuller's Folly covers a very steep part of the main face of Mount Lincoln and brings you right to the top of the Sisters. The rocks above Silverbelt make for some absolutely massive airs, assuming conditions are favorable. The 58 is a very steep face on the Looker's right side of Mount Lincoln. It directly filters onto Hidden Gully, which is a very tight slot through the trees. Now we get to debatably the most technical and rowdy terrain across all of the mountains on this list. The Palisades at Sugar Bowl are home to a series of borderline inhuman Alaska-level spines and cliffs. You rarely see terrain of this caliber in bounds, and that's exactly why these lines are hardly open. It really takes a lot of snow to make these skiable, but if they're open, assuming you really know what you're doing, they're an absolute must-hit. Sugar Bowl and Nancy's Couloir offer the most technical descents on the east face of Mount Disney. Hourglass and Hans Stroll are some very steep and narrow chutes off Disney Ridge. Finally, let's talk about the newest terrain at Sugar Bowl, Crow's Peak. Crow's Peak offers by far the best tree skiing at the resort. Crow's Face covers the steepest part of Crow's Peak, but is one of the more wide open lines here. The other one and Crow's Nest Glades offer some solid tree riding, but are mellower than other double blacks at the resort. There are also some really good cliff drops right under the top of the lift, but make sure conditions are solid before you commit to a drop. As a whole, Sugar Bowl's variety of expert terrain all across the mountain, along with the towering Palisades shadowing the whole resort, makes it absolutely worth checking out for experts in California. Finally, we arrive at the most iconic and overall most challenging mountain on this list, Palisades Tahoe. As you all probably know by now, Palisades Tahoe consists of the now renamed Olympic Valley and Alpine Meadows. We'll start off with the Alpine Meadows side, and then talk about the Olympic Valley or Palisades side. While the Palisades side is much more infamous for its burly lines, Alpine Meadows still offers plenty of extreme lines that rival the most challenging lines at Palisades. The main difference is that many of Alpine's extreme runs require more local knowledge or exploration to find, whereas the extreme terrain at Palisades is more in your face. Starting off with the Scott Chair, the quintessential run here is Scott Chute, a very steep technical mogul run that is reminiscent of the steeplechase runs at Aspen Highlands, albeit shorter. In between Scott Chute and Promised Land are a few unmarked extreme lines that require a lot of snow to be skiable. Moving to the backside of Alpine, Grouse Saddle and Grouse Rock are the only expert lines along this ridgeline, but they take a significant amount of time to get to from the summit lift. Moving back to the front side, Sherwood Cliffs is the only expert trail directly accessed from the Treeline Cirque Top Station. It's a technical little area, especially earlier in the season when the rocks are still protruding. Off the top station of the Sherwood Express, the main lift on Alpine's backside, you can access Counterweight Gully, which is a solid little shot through the trees and is super fun. In addition, you can also take this Our Father traverse to access the lower part of High Yellow Gully. The remaining expert lines are only accessible off Summit Express. We'll start with the Looker's right side and then talk about the Looker's left. Idiot's Delight is, in my opinion, one of the most challenging and exposed zones on the mountain. Lines here require a very sketchy 50-degree cornice drop into a series of gnarly chutes that can require some prolonged straight lining, not at all for the faint of heart. Beaver Bowl and Estelle offer a wide variety of lines from big mountain steeps to more mellow, albeit still very steep, expert runs. Bernie's Bowl and the Buttress offer even more gnarly lines, but will drop you a few hundred feet below the lift. Another fun one in the summit pod is Pete's Peril, which is a fun little face with a steep, narrow chute going through it. From the summit lift, hike 10 minutes to reach, in my opinion, the hardest zone on the mountain, Keyhole. Keyhole Slopes is the main line through the zone and is already very gnarly. However, the unmarked lines here, namely Nuns and Marhankins, are some of the scariest descents across all of Palisades Tahoe. Finally, we have High Yellow Face and High Yellow Gully, which offer some of the best steep skiing on the mountain. High Yellow Gully specifically is one of my favorite lines at Alpine Meadows and is absolutely worth the hike. Okay, let's shift over to the Palisades side. Polson's Gully is the main marked expert run off the Red Dog Chair, but frankly, there are so many little cliffs and slots sprinkled throughout these lower mountain trees. Let's shift over to the mothership itself, KT-22. This east face area, adjacent to the Olympic Lady, always seems to offer really nice conditions. I'm a big fan of the Tom's Tumble area, Tamara's, and Diagonal Chute, which runs right under Olympic Lady. McConkey's, or Eagle's Nest, is one of the most ridiculous inbounds lines in the world. Ambrosia Chute, which is adjacent to it, is much more palpable for the average expert skier. The Fingers are some of the most iconic features at any ski resort, and on powder days offer some of the burliest skiing you'll ever experience. These can be found directly under the lift, here. The west face of KT-22 offers several awesome chutes, mogul runs, and glade skiing. My favorite runs here are the various nose chutes, Chute 75, and the Rock Garden Dead Tree area. Each run here just feels so unique, and that's what makes KT-22 special. Closer to the Funatel, a lot of terrain under Broken Arrow is really interesting and would certainly be rated double black anywhere else. I'm a big fan of Tower 16 and Broken Arrow, especially when temperatures warm up and the snow here becomes slushy. Moving back to my personal favorite lift on the mountain, Headwall offers some of the best steep skiing at Palisades Tahoe, with North Bowl and Slot the most prominent. North Bowl is your classic steep alpine bump-riddled bowl. The Slot is a very steep face that often holds some excellent snow in pockets. Although it doesn't look that intimidating from the lift, Light Towers offer some of the most exposed and nerve-wracking skiing on the entire mountain. All the terrain from Cornice Bowl to Enchanted Forest is some of the best at Palisades Tahoe. Specifically, I love the trio of chutes that are Classic, Hourglass, and Needle. Moving up the mountain, from the top of Siberia, hike to the nearby peak to access the Palisades, which are the chutes that inspired the resort's new name. National and Main are very challenging, but Extra, Tube, Box, and especially Chimney are where you'll find some of the hairiest lines in the country. These chutes are the absolute pinnacle of skiing Palisades, and anyone who can absolutely should try at least once. Moving to the top of Emigrant, Mainline Pocket offers a plethora of absolutely ridiculous lines, most of which involve large mandatory airs. On the other side of Emigrant is the Funnel, one of the best bull runs on the mountain. A bit below the Funnel are the Shirley Chutes, 4 awesome lines that ski great even in suboptimal conditions. Over on the side of Granite Chief, Corkscrew is a very technical glade area that's one of my all-time favorite areas at Palisades. There are several cliffs scattered right underneath and around the Granite Chief lift line that make for some awesome hucks. Even though it takes a bit of hiking to reach, the couloirs off Granite Chief Peak are arguably the best lines in the entire pod. Finally, let's briefly discuss the Silverado pod, which is most infamous for being elusively open. Silverado is honestly a zone where it's better for you to explore due to its sheer scale, but I can certainly talk about the highlights. My favorite part of Silverado is the stuff underneath Trample, including China Wall, Kima's Paw, and Mr. Toad's Chute. The China Wall specifically is home to some of the most intense lines on the mountain. Medusa and Kathmandu are slightly more mellow areas that go around the runs we just talked about. Ludwig's Castle, which is adjacent to Bailey's Cirque, also hosts some really nice steep runs. Jake's is another solid chute that is much more challenging than its rating would imply. In all honesty, I can't do the endless amount of expert terrain options across Palisades Tahoe's footprint justice in this video, but be on the lookout for our comprehensive insider's guide to it, which will be dropping later this year. Alright, that sums it up for the most extreme resort skiing in California. A shout out to Noah East Coast Skier and Taylor Skiing for correctly guessing the mystery clip in the East Coast Experience video. If you want to get shouted out in a future video just like this, keep an eye out for mystery clips and guess them in the comments. As always, please put any questions you have down below. Thank you all so much for watching. All my love, I'm out.